Our last speaker of the day is Stephen Fulkerson, the VP of Customer Success from Upland Software, and he is going to be talking to us today about sounding the alarm, 3 non-negotiables for an effective early warning system.
Hello, San Francisco. How are y'all doing today? Good. Well, all right, I got some who's in there. All right. Good to have everybody here. I appreciate y'all making the time to be here today. Real quick, I'm going to walk you through some introductions to myself, introductions to Upland Software, and then walk you through some of the 3 non-negotiables for early warning system. We're going to be focused on executive relationships, tracking usage and adoption, as well as team engagement. So a little bit about myself. I'm the Vice President of Customer Success for Upland Software. I run 3 departments. I run Customer Success. I also run Customer Experience, where I have Salpi Kralian in the audience. She's my Manager of Customer Experience. And I also run Customer Education and Enablement, which is like our training department. I've been in this role for about I've been in customer success for about 15 years. I know it hasn't always been customer success, customer relationship management, account management, but I've been playing in this space for quite some time. And then also in my part-time life, I'm an intelligence officer in the military, which kind of gives me a different perspective on offense and defense, and I'll share some of those points of views with you today. So a little bit about Upland Software as a company. We provide cloud solutions that across the enterprise, enabling amazing customer outcomes in project and IT financial management, workflow automation, as well as in digital engagement. We have approximately 10 product lines underneath our umbrellas that fall within these 3 verticals. I was on vacation last week, and actually some of this has actually even changed since we created the slides. We've actually sold one of our product solutions, and we have acquired 2 more. So the 2 that we've acquired, Lead, Lander, and Hip Cricket, are falling in within our digital engagement. But each one of these provide value to the enterprise as a whole. So I'm really fortunate to be able to be a part of a team that really provides amazing customer outcomes. Without our customers, there is no Upland. So we've been very fortunate. Many of you sitting in this room are our customers, whether you knew it or not. So we're very grateful to have the customers that we have under our umbrella, approximately about 1,600 customers, and very happy that we can provide solutions for them going forward. So I want to level set in terms of where we're at. So as you've been here today, you're learning that customer success management means various things depending on which company you're talking to. So let's talk about what customer success managers do at Upland Software. First and foremost, they're responsible for customer satisfaction, trying to make sure that the customer has what they need to be successful and to be happy. A subsequent from that is the renewals. If the customers are happy, then hopefully we've done our jobs that the customer will want to renew. And then last but not least is land and expand, right? So we've made the customer happy. They've secured their renewals. We have 10 other solutions at this time, 3 in the pipeline, because we've got other acquisitions coming that may help us expand and further our footprint within the customer. But what's really important is where are we establishing the relationships? So we really strive to make sure that we have relationships established at 3 levels. First and foremost is the executive sponsor. Second is the business owner, the person that's kind of owning the solution and making sure that's getting implemented, and then the application administrator. It's really important for us to have relationships established at these 3 levels, because if one of those levels leaves the organization and you've established a relationship with the other 2, then you can get introduced as the new one is being onboarded. And as you know, it can be very difficult to get those relationships established if you don't already have them made. So the first non-negotiable from where we sit is establishing those executive relationships. You want to make sure that you have strong executive relationships with the executive sponsors. And the reason why, they own the budget. So they're actually the ones that have ownership of the budget and decide whether they're going to renew with you or not. In order to do that, one of the things that I found in our organization is you have to be able to speak their language. When I first arrived, some of our customer success managers were saying, hey, it's hard for me to get that executive level relationship established. And one of the things that I learned growing up in customer success management from our president of our company was you have to speak their language. If you're talking about dit.dash and this cool little button will get you here, you're probably talking to a lower level person within the organization. And I recognize some organizations, the executive sponsor can be all 3, right? The application owner, the business owner, and the executive sponsor. But the executive sponsor is going to be speaking a higher level of language. And if you're speaking that kind of language, that will give you a greater audience or greater time with them. If you're speaking below them, then they're going to tune you out. One of the things that you want to do is make sure that you know their concerns. Early in my life, in a prior life, when I was a customer success manager, I really invested time at a CIO level for a major manufacturer here in the United States. And he called and said, hey, I want you to come up and spend some time with us. I'm going to have a department head meeting, and I want you to come up. And I said, well, wouldn't you like our executive sponsors to come? He's like, no, I want you to come. So I went up. They put me on a golf cart, took me on a tour through their facility, sat down at their department head meeting. He was like, hey, this is Stephen Fulkerson. He's going to sit in our department head meeting, and he's going to help make sure that what we're doing with the solution is going to be correct as I roll it out to the board of directors. And one of the executives turned and looked and said, he got a golf cart tour? He said, yeah. And she goes, I had to wear high heels. That was an hour walk. Why did he get a golf cart tour and I had to walk through high heels? I don't know why I got the golf cart tour. But at the end, he said, I really wanted him to come because he's adding value, and I really didn't care about the executive sponsor. So that was the executive sponsor on our end. So again, me showing that I know their business, knowing their concerns, and then also really making sure that we apply that if they're buying a solution within our space, we're typically the experts, so we should know their business, we should know where they're wanting to go and what they're wanting to do. Some of the best practices that we learned following the previous speaker, he was talking about people, tools, and process. We implemented a change in our CRM solution. I said, let's take a look and find out how many of us, the CSMs, do not have executive relationships established. So in our system, flag it if you don't have a CRM, if you don't have an executive sponsor relationship established. Flag it at risk and then reduce the renewal rate by 30%. Because if the executive leaves and we don't have that relationship established or we don't have the ends to the next executive, we could be in a precarious situation. We also provided training on how to get introduced into the executive sponsor, how to ask questions that if you were introduced, unfortunately, at the lowest level, how do you ask questions that the person you're dealing with can't answer? Where they have to go, well, you're going to have to talk to my boss, or that person says, you're going to have to talk to my boss, so that you're asking questions at higher levels. So we provided training around that. And then we invested in Totango that helped us culminate and pull everything together, even with including executive relationships, to give us a better view in terms of where we're at with the health of these accounts. Some of the results, they were eye-opening. When I asked everybody to change the status of their accounts, I didn't realize that so many were going to have the data skewed because having them adjust the renewal projections by 30% all of a sudden started throwing off my renewal projections, my forecast in terms of what I was expecting. I expected maybe a handful of accounts. I didn't expect, potentially 25% of each one of my CSMs had not had executive relationships established. So it really kind of messed up what I was expecting to be a very easy fix. So some of the things that we learned in this process of building executive relationships was to trust but verify. In some cases, as we've acquired new companies to be a part of our solution offering, some of those product lines don't necessarily always know what the executive sponsor is. They think that the person that they're talking to is high enough or probably at the highest level. So we have to make sure that we're verifying that they really have gotten all the way up to the person that owns the budget. Second is to really focus on the surveys, right? If we're sending out surveys, whether they're Net Promoter Scores, customer experience surveys, if they're going to executives and they're not responding, chances are may not have that relationship well established. I know many of you are going to say, well, executives are very busy and they're not going to have time to do that. I can tell you we have a lot of product lines where executives take the time to do the surveys because we are a strategic solution for them. They want to give us feedback. They want us to know what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. So that can be a good indicator. And the other thing that we started really doing is tracking our executives. For some of you know that CIOs, they have a tenure rate of about 18 months, and then they move on to another organization. So we started using a plethora of tools to really help us give a greater visibility on the movements of those C-levels. Inside View, LinkedIn, as well as Google Alerts. So those were some of the things that we did to really get greater visibility in there. Now, the other non-negotiable that we had is around tracking usage and adoption. Now, usage and adoption to me are two separate things. Just because you have usage does not mean you have adoption. So one of the things that we really want to focus in on as a SaaS provider, software as a solution provider, is taking a look at the customer usage to give us information and indication in terms of are they really engaged in using our application. Totango helps give us that full view, right? So we can take a look at some of the usage and tie it into subjective data to give us a full picture view. But one of the things that we have to really focus in on is validating that the value perceived is received, right? So we've had situations where usage would suggest that everything is going well. But if the executive had a perception in terms of what they were expecting for a final outcome, and we don't validate that they're getting that, regardless of what the usage is suggesting, we may have a miss. So that's one of the other things that you want to do. And we do this 90 days post-go live on anything. If it's post-go live phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, we do a value validation to make sure that the value perceived is received. So some of the things that we learned as best practices was reviewing the trends. You know, as we looked at the usage data, it may suggest that there is a possible situation that we need to address. And if we did see something, we want to make sure everybody flagged it early. But we also want to validate that information with the customer. If you were in Omer's presentation earlier, I was talking about how we also have a time reporting solution as one of our solution sets. Well, if you looked at one of our customers, a great story was we looked at the usage data and we had 100% compliance on time reporting. We're like, yeah, great, this customer's happy. So we go back to the executive and say, hey, usage suggests that you got 100% compliance, everybody's really happy. It's like, not so much. They're compliant because we put it in their compensation plans. They're compliant because we've mandated it, but they're really not happy with the overall, there's not the adoption that we're looking for. So it's always important to go back then and verify that, hey, your perceptions are really their reality. And in that case, we just had to work with them to better explain why, because they had some resource utilization issues. For the end users to be compliant here, really help them build a case to have more people. So once they realized what the use case was, then we had better adoption. So if you take that information back to your customers and say, hey, this is what I perceive as the situation, our results were mixed. For the most part, customers were very appreciative. They were grateful that we came back and said, hey, this is how we see your implementation going. This is how we see your experience. But we also had some customers that didn't always tell us the truth. True story. So we had a $265,000 account that we started seeing some trends that suggested things weren't going right. So we instantly went into reactive mode and said, hey, let's set up some meetings. Let's understand what's going on. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. We actually want to talk to you about license expansion. Oh, okay, well, that kind of threw us off a little bit. License expansion. Okay, well, let's talk. So we get in these conversations with the customer. Kid you not, 30 minutes after the meeting is over, we've talked about license expansion, expanding their footprint. They've argued nothing was wrong with the usage trends, just an anomaly. 30 minutes after that call, they sent us a letter of termination. Probably, because we didn't have an executive relationship established, that didn't help. I thought it was an anomaly with one customer, different product line. The next week, the same thing happened. We had a customer do the same thing, talked about license expansion, and then 30 minutes after the meeting, send us a notice of cancellation. So that may be a new trick because everybody knows that if they're given clues that they're going to leave, that we, as customer success, go full force into making sure they don't leave. But that was a surprise to us. We did not expect to see that coming. So some of our lessons learned, as a provider, going into the customer saying, how do you think adoption's going? Not the right question to ask. If you've got access to the data, and if Totango comes to me and says, how do you think everything's going? I'm going to go, you tell me. You've got access to all my system. You tell me how you think things are going. But instead, come back to your customers with, these are our findings. Based off the usage, based off what we're seeing, this is how we think things are going. Can you validate that against your perception of the adoption? And then trust the data. The expression, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. In those two scenarios that I told you about where we had customers telling us everything was fine, they weren't going to leave, nothing was a problem, it'll quack like a duck, walk like a duck. We just chose to think, oh, maybe they're being honest here. Trust the data because it's probably telling a good story. The third and last one here is team engagement. This is one of our triple crown endeavors to make sure that everybody is fully engaged. One of the things that we want to make sure from the implementation, customer success, and forward is if you're starting to see limited updates from the implementation teams or customer success post-go live, there's probably a weak relationship going on and we're not fully engaged. If you're seeing limited business reviews or the relationship stays tactical, it's probably a limited relationship. So again, offensive earlier, non-negotiable 1 and 2, now defensive, 3 here in terms of looking at our own internal teams to make sure that they're doing the correct things. I recognize not all SaaS providers, you all go out on the road to visit your customers. We do have enterprise solutions, so we do encourage our CSMs to get on the road and visit some of our executive accounts, our enterprise accounts rather. And if we started seeing, a limited movement in travel, that's an indicator to us, again, that we don't have those relationships and we're not fully engaged. And then one other thing, we talked about tactical relationships. For us, you don't want to live in tactical. There's great momentum when CSMs get involved, right? They love to fix problems, but you can't stay there. You got to work strategic in parallel with tactical. Okay, Mr. Customer, we're going to fix this problem, but we're also going to move you into a new strategic direction to try to make sure you're getting added value. And if we don't have that strategic direction identified, chances are we've got very limited team engagement. And those are one of the things that we want to make sure that we avoid. So some of the best practices, making sure that you train the team on best practices, how to give pulse updates, how to give status on what's going on with the accounts, how to stay fully engaged. We provided templates for them so that they didn't have to ask questions on how to do this. And we provide coaching and mentoring at each opportunity. So people, process. Now we're talking about tools. Salpy's team set up reminders in our system so that they could have alerts at 90, 60, and 30 days prior to renewals so that they're fully engaged with the customer if they weren't already. And then we also have neglected account reports. So they're required to provide pulse updates or status updates on their accounts at certain intervals. And if we didn't see them in those intervals, we started getting alerts that the accounts were being neglected. And it went to the various executive teams, including their general managers, myself, and the chief customer officer. And then we continue to leverage Totango to the fullest to try to get full visibility from a portfolio view, and then leverage other factors to help us better understand in terms of our team's engagement, such as surveys that would go out, because we would ask from each category of where there was a team that was interacting with our customers. So some of those things will help give us greater visibility into if our teams were fully engaged to making sure that the customers were successful. Some of the results that we saw, in 2015, we had an increase in our Net Promoter Scores, up by 30%. We just finished our Q1 customer, our CX survey, and it was up again by 25%. So in a period of just a year and a half, we've got roughly a 55% increase in overall customer success satisfaction. And if you take a look at our relationships, we're not there yet, but we're trying to move more from tactical into strategic for a better, stronger relationship. So we've had some successes there. So some of our lessons learned as a result of all this, some of the cancellations and the churn that we had were avoidable, very avoidable, because we didn't have these processes in place. We weren't looking at our teams. We weren't looking at the customer in the right way, at least in these 3 areas. And again, there's more areas that we look at, but again, I couldn't talk about, the 23 non-negotiable things. We've got to keep it kind of limited here. So we had some avoidable churn that was unnecessary. And the other thing that we did is we learned that originally when we started having the updates coming out, it was coming to myself and the CCO in Salpy, and we started realizing with 1,600 customers and the pulse updates coming in, we couldn't read all of them. So we started including the practice directors, the general managers, and other executives so that the CSMs, because they're so engaged, right, they're in the details. But sometimes if you got to step back and look at it and get a holistic view, we could see things that maybe they couldn't and give them some feedback going, hey, have you thought about this, or have you looked at this a different way? And that gave the CSM some more ammunition to go back and talk to the customers to make sure that we're okay.